Hello and welcome to a movie review podcast. I'm your host, Deoxys Prime, and I've got with me my good friend Frank. Say hello, Frank.
How we doing, guys?
We're doing good tonight. We've been brought back together on this very special occasion. Um, for those of you who don't know, and I don't know why you would, because we did these podcasts like the first one was like almost a decade ago now. Like holy shit. Um, Frank and I are big fans of Spider-Man, and we did a couple podcasts talking about the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 when they came out. Um, and the reason is we had a lot of thoughts on those movies. As fans of the character, they were certainly interesting movies that we kind of felt like we needed to say something about, and sometimes you just need to do a podcast about it to get your thoughts out there. So that's why we originally did those. But um, given the circumstances of this new Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man No Way Home, it felt like the right time to do one of these again. Um, and so that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna talk about the movie. We're gonna talk about our thoughts. And of course, if you haven't seen the movie, you probably should not listen to this.
I was
Uh,
just going to say it's going to be impossible to speak about this at length without getting into like full spoilers for everything that happens in the movie.
Very much so.
So,
Yeah, it's I mean, just like this last year of just trying to dodge spoilers of this movie in general has been tough. But
oh my god.
um, if like you still shouldn't listen to this, even if you know a lot of what's going on here. So I would highly advise. I think it's a good movie. We'll get into the specifics, but like I do think you should go see it. And if you are at all interested in hearing what a couple Spider-Man fans have to say about it, then you could listen to this afterwards.
I think overall the main sentiment behind this movie is that it's a real love letter to all of the Spider-Man films, beginning with Sam Raimi's 2002 movie, leading up to this point. It is so full of just earnest enthusiasm for everything that has built up to this stage of Spider-Man's presence on the big screen.
Hmm.
So it's kind of important to look at it through that lens, um, especially with regard to the presentation of uh, not even just like the villains that are presented, but also like Spider-Man's characterization as a whole. So yeah, I would say not only just watch that movie before listen to this podcast, but it might even behoove you to familiarize yourself with the circumstances of even the two Amazing Spider-Man movies that aren't so great in my opinion, and the three Raimi movies, because they are very good at informing not just this movie, but I think the trajectory for what's going to come afterwards in Spider-Man's character.
Yeah, like this is not only a sequel to the Tom Holland movies. This is also like a sequel slash epilogue to those other trilogies. And the movie, takes some time to explain some things to you, but otherwise, it is very much a better idea to just having watched everything. You will get the most out of this movie if that's the case.
Yeah,
It's still enjoy. I think
100%.
you would still enjoy it. Otherwise, it's not hard to look at it and go, hey, there's a Spider-Man. I understand it, but it is so much richer having experienced those other movies, good and bad.
And yeah, so because surprising amounts of nuance from like recontextualizing those Andrew Garfield movies and taking them into how that character has evolved in this one. So I guess we should probably lead off with the spoiler. The rumors are true. You know, Despite Andrew Garfield saying for a year and a half that he wasn't going to be in this movie, he's there. And not only is he there, he now has the benefit of a competent scriptwriter that isn't fucking Mark Webb. And lo and behold, he actually puts on quite the performance.
Yeah,
Um,
it's funny because like as soon as I can't remember which came first, whether it was the villains who were revealed in this movie or they all kind of came out at once because it was the big story that like they were looking to sign all these actors to deals to come back for this movie,
right.
and everyone's like, "Holy shit! Like, is this real?" And then it came out that Alfred Molina was coming back as Doc Ock, and then Jamie Foxx coming back as Electro, and as soon
Right.
as
Those are
that
the
came
big
out, it's
rumors.
like, okay, they've got to bring back the Spider Man. And Yeah, despite all efforts of Marvel to keep this under wraps, like it was quite clear that they were coming back for this movie. But I will say, I did appreciate that they didn't blow their load and put them in the trailers and the marketing and stuff like that. Because even though I knew they were going to show up, the manner in which they did appear was a surprise. It's like,
Yeah, I
oh
mean,
shit, I
it
didn't
was
realize they were coming in this early in the movie, and
right.
I appreciated not knowing the circumstances of how they got there.
Yeah, for sure. It would have definitely been a choice, in my opinion, if they came in, like in the big finale or whatever, just to fucking, like show up and help against the new Sinister Six or really the Sinister Five or whatever. But they really took the time to put them in, I think, right when they were needed. It's a long movie. It's 2.5 hours.
It's a long movie, but
But
doesn't feel long, thankfully.
yeah, well, you know what? There are points where it kind of ebbs and flows, in my opinion. Um, the beginning feels a little top heavy, but then once you actually get into like the, you know, the main conflict that happens at the climax, when Willem Dafoe really gets his chance to shine, um, that's when I think the movie starts getting a lot more tight in terms of the pacing. Um, great cameo in the very beginning that I'm not seeing talked about a lot, but was absolutely phenomenal to me. Um, was Daredevil showing up at the beginning.
Yeah,
That made me lose my shit.
that was also
Um,
that was also rumored too, and it was nice to see that they brought him back, even if
yeah,
it was just for
I'm
a small
so
part.
glad that they actually went through with it. Because his scene was very well implemented, and he gets this small moment to shine when he catches the brick, and it's so interesting. I really would love to see him part of the MCU proper. I love his character. His Netflix series is the best one in my opinion.
I'm sure that's
Um,
their plan, and I was also like, I'm sure it's happened in the comics a lot, but there was a specific like two-parter in the Spider-Man animated series in the '90s where Daredevil was Peter Parker's lawyer
right,
when Peter
that's
Parker was
right.
framed by Wilson Fisk, and I
Yeah,
thought like
right.
that was such a nice like it was. I don't think it was intentionally throwing back to that, but as someone who really loved that show, it was nice to see that kind of connect again here.
Mm-hmm. Well, that show actually took some time to bring in a lot of other characters across like the Marvel franchises and kind of cross them over into it. I remember Iron Man and War Machine were in it as well.
Yeah,
Um,
just about everyone showed up.
Dormammu was like like one of the threats that was lingering in the background, like in one of the Venom sagas or whatever.
Yeah, they had like a two-parter with Doctor Strange in that series too.
Yeah. So interesting to see Doctor Strange brought back in this capacity here, and I really appreciated his portrayal in this movie because I was always pretty lukewarm on Doctor Strange as a character. I always thought his movie was kind of so-so. It's just like, oh, here's Iron Man again, but now he has to go to fucking Tibet and learn magic and shit and do with Dormammu and this, that, the other. But when he got this kind of side role in this movie, um, I really appreciated like kind of the contrast that he gave with Peter Parker, especially like him being the adult in his life now. Uh, Peter goes to him first, and then he's like, "Wait a second, like, you didn't even like try to plead your case? Like, what are you fucking doing here? Like, you fucking went straight to magic here." So like, I thought that was cute.
I thought they were a nice pair, specifically because even though Doctor Strange is such a powerful character and an adult, he also is a very reckless character, and Peter
Right.
in this movie is also a very reckless character, which I think ties into where they go with his character. But like having these two characters pair up and cause this kind of chaos, like kind of made perfect sense.
So, originally, I read that they were going to just try and market this movie without all these fucking like multiverse villains coming in and everything like that. Like, it was solely going to be like a Peter Parker, Doctor Strange shenanigans kind of movie, and
Yes.
then kind of like go crazy like once the actual movie dropped with like all these fucking villains coming in. But like, I can't imagine how much of a nightmare that would have been to try and market this movie as. So.
Yeah, and I don't know how you would have kept all that casting a secret.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you like the whole reason why we had suspicion that Andrew Garfield was going to be in this movie was because I think they caught him on camera, like on the set, and
That
he
was like
was
the first real proof.
yeah,
Like there was a
right,
news story back earlier in the year that they were negotiating with them to come back, but like it wasn't like confirmed, so it could have fell through, and they would have had like to do something else with the movie.
right,
But yeah, once those set pics came out and no one could really definitively prove they were fake, like
right.
it's clear that like yeah, this was the final direction for the movie.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But I thought it came together pretty well. Um, like the fight scene between Doctor Strange and Peter Parker in particular, like um, it was pretty visually interesting when they went to the fucking mirror
I'm
dimension shit.
always happy when they do that because it was like seeing that in the Doctor Strange movie was such like so fucking mind blowing and like one
Right.
of the most visually interesting things they've done in the MCU. So any chance they have to explore that again, like I'm always down for that.
Yeah, so I think these movies are best enjoyed kind of like as roller coasters, right? Like
Yeah,
you go and you watch like this kind of visual spectacle happen in front of you. So like if you're watching it for that, then this scene I think was what you're there for. And they did a really great job with the scenery, like all these moving set pieces that kind of come together in the end. Um and um, the way that Peter Parker gets out of that situation is very classic Peter, which I really appreciate. Like it never feels like it's too far gone that Peter can't play to his strengths.
mhm.
Like I'm gonna compare it to like Hero Academia, right? Where like Hero Academia, it's like you have this character Deku, and Deku is presented at the very beginning to be like this big analyst, right? Like his strength is not that he's really strong with fucking one for all, but that he knows these quirks inside and out, and that he's able to like tactically use that to his advantage, right? Um, and where Hero Academia kind of falters at the end by putting him in these situations where now that kind of tactician nature kind of falls to the wayside, and he just overpowers the opponent, right? Like he does one for all, 1,000,000% or whatever, or he gets a power boost from fucking Arya and just beats the shit out of Overhaul. Like Peter Parker, the way he gets out of these situations is by putting his math whiz brain to good use, and like analyzing the situation around him and being like, oh, like in this case, it's like, okay, like this is geometry here, like I can do that, and that's how he manages to win the day. Like it's cute
Yeah,
when they have all these little nods to his scientist background, because I definitely feel like the Andrew Garfield movies kind of forget about that.
totally.
So
Yeah, it is like there are a lot of problems with those movies, but that is one of them. Like his character felt very inconsistent. So whenever they had the chance to remind people that Peter Parker is like one of the smartest characters in this universe, like yes, take it, please. I'm
yeah,
always
it's cute. Like
yeah.
it's cute and it feels true to his roots. And it's great to see fucking Toby Garfield, Toby Garfield, isn't he? Toby Maguire go through that same sort of element as well.
Yep.
So, um, seeing all three of them in the lab, we're like really jumping around in terms of the plot here, but that's fine.
A little, yeah,
Um,
but that's fine.
seeing all three of them in the lab, it kind of felt to me like Andrew Garfield is a little out of place in that scene because like he's not really like a scientist kind of character, right? Like
A
he,
little bit, yeah, but like it is hard to say how long time has passed
that's true.
in his universe since we last saw him. Like even if you assume it's like real time, it would be like 8, 10 years. Um, but like if you want to get into this, that is another thing this movie really succeeds at is finally giving him a chance to really be a good Peter Parker.
Oh my god! And
Like
it's unbelievable.
it pisses me off to a certain degree because now I have to listen to people try to convince me and everyone else that those movies were good in the first place and they
Yeah,
were not.
I
But
was gonna try and save that for later, but like yeah, that's a great segue into this. Like the narrative around those two movies has shifted really hard now, right?
yeah,
Like
it reminds me a lot of like Sonic Unleashed, where you have older fans who understand just why those movies do not work, and you have younger fans who maybe that was their first experience with Spider-Man, who like are
Right.
really into those movies. And like I remember, like, we had this conversation on the podcast. There was a specific scene in the first movie that almost made me walk out, and I've
Yeah.
never
No.
done that with a movie before.
Yeah.
And it's when fucking Andrew Garfield gets on that skateboard and goes to the skate park, and I was like, dude, this is not
Not
Peter
Peter
Parker.
Parker.
I know this sounds like nitpicking, but it's like there's so many things in that movie that are endemic to how they don't fundamentally understand the character, and
Oh
that
my
was just
god!
the big one
But
to
the
me.
ending of the first movie is the biggest offender of that. And then they tried walking, like they acknowledged at the end of the first movie that he's acting severely out of character, right? When he makes this promise to Gwen Stacy's father, like as he's dying, right? Like stay away from my daughter because she's gonna get roped into your shit, basically. And the fucking he walks in to class the next day and the teacher's like, "Don't make promises you can't keep." And he whispers to Gwen Stacy, like, "But those are the best kind." Like
Oh my
that is
god.
that is so not Peter Parker's ethos,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And-
There's it's funny. There's a specific scene in this movie in No Way Home that really illustrates the point to me, and it's when you have the all three Spider-Man commiserating with each other, telling them like who they lost that like
So
influenced their life,
let
and
me tell you something that let
Toby
me tell you
says
something that
Uncle
happened.
Ben, and Andrew says Gwen Stacy. In And you have to remember, in his movie, Uncle Ben also died, and that was
And I
not
was
the
just gonna
seminal
say,
moment of his
I was
character.
actually just gonna bring this up because that really bothered me because this whole entire thing is like how Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker kills the robber like by throwing him out the window in Spider-Man 1, right? And he's like, "I that didn't do anything," right?
Yes.
And Andrew Garfield spends the whole first movie looking for this guy with the star tattoo, right?
Yep.
And so that's his quest for revenge, and it's consuming him, and it's never addressed.
It's not only is it not addressed, it's dropped in the second movie entirely.
Yeah, but like that would have been the perfect opportunity in this movie to maybe bring it back and be like, I'm still looking for that guy, and like like when I think about it, like I just feel so hollow because it's like this is like the whole reason why I became Spider-Man. Like it's a quest for revenge now. It's not
Mhm.
like a power responsibility kind of thing. Like his motivation for becoming Spider-Man was I need to chase down this guy with the star tattoo,
Yeah, and like
and
I understand how the death of Gwen in his universe changed him, and also it does like bleed nicely into a good moment he has later in this film.
oh, it's
But
super
like
cathartic, super
that the
cathartic.
fact that they brought that up as like his most important moment is like it is in those films, but like again, it's further showing just how different his character was, and different in a way that I felt was really off the mark.
Mhm. Yeah, so I really thought that in terms of his wrapping around to like actually have friends in this movie, right?
Yeah.
Because the only other friend that he had is Harry, is played by Dane DeHaan, who he kind of has this like on again, off again sort of like he's like really hot and cold with him,
It's
right?
so weird, yeah.
It's their chemistry is very peculiar. Like Dane DeHaan puts on a really interesting performance as Harry. It's very um different from the James Franco character. But I was never really sold on the fact that like these two are supposed to be friends. But he has genuine chemistry with the other two Peter Parkers, and so it's interesting seeing him bounce back and forth with these and like joke around and like have these kind of like awkward moments where he's like, "Hey,
Mm.
I love you guys," and and the other two are just like at a loss of like what the fuck to say. Like, it's cute to see him get to be kind of dorky because
He's weird, but like not weird in the way he was in his movies, where it was just so off-putting and
oh my god,
awkward.
because watching him interact with Gwen Stacy in the first movie is genuinely uncomfortable.
Yes.
Like it actually makes my stomach twist. Like watching it, like that scene where they're on the balcony, like there is not an ounce of chemistry to be found between these two
Yes.
characters. It's unreal. But seeing him pal around with the other two Peters, you know, it it's still awkward but in a more endearing way.
Totally.
Like in a way where like he just like kind of like doesn't really understand where the line is, and he is he'll overstep it in a way that is kind of uncomfortable to the other Peters, but like they kind of get it because he's them. So like you'll
And,
have this scene where like Tobey Maguire is like, oh man, like my back is killing me or whatever. And he's like, yeah, like I'll get it for you, and like
yeah,
they
and
have this
like
whole sequence where
I
they
like
crack
that
back.
he was still like a little vulnerable. Like the other Spider-Man had to pump him up.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, right.
and
It's like, oh yeah, you're amazing. You're
yeah,
like say it, like I am amazing.
it's a
Like I know for
it's
sure.
a cute joke, but also I like that too. Like it also served to not only show like yeah he is a little weaker in terms of his personality, but like um he is now in a better place and
Yeah, for
he's more
sure.
receptive to that.
Yeah, I think that Tobey Maguire's character, like seeing like how he is, the way that he talks about Mary Jane, right? Like and like the confidence that he has that Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker is going to like make it work like at his own pace.
Yeah,
Like
it's
that's
it's funny to see people who kind of criticized him in this movie for being like too low energy, and that's really just because his character is so different from the other two Spider-Man.
right.
But like like when he just walks out of that portal, it's like yeah, that's just him. That's his character.
Yeah, that he moves and acts like in the exact same like dorky, like kind of like lackadaisical sort of way. Um, and what I think is just great in terms of the mirror between like Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker and Tom Holland's Peter Parker is like I feel like unlike Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker, they both have to kind of take it on the chin a little bit. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like when Tobey Maguire his Spider-Man like kind of like goes through a victory, it always comes with like two or three losses.
Yeah, and I
And
want to get into that later, but yeah, that's a good point.
and Tom Holland, I feel like he in a very similar way can't catch a break, but it's underscored as well by the fact that like he is a kid, right? Like we're going through this whole like college admissions kind of phase with him where it's like yeah, he's a high schooler, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
they kind of breezed through that a bit in the first Raimi movie and then in Spider-Man 2 because come Spider-Man 2 like he's already a university student, right? Like he's already starting his first year of
yeah.
college. Um but I think in part that's because you can really only do so much with Tobey Maguire as a high school student. um
That is true.
but the first two Tom Holland movies are very very much high school movies. So
Yeah, let's get into that because I do want to bring up this point because like as cool it is as it is to have all these villains and the other Spider-Man back, by far the most interesting part of this movie is what it does for Tom Holland's character,
right,
and it's that it's so crazy because like when they brought him in to reboot this franchise for a second time, everyone was like, for the love of God, please do not do an origin movie. We know the origin. We've seen it a million
right,
times.
right.
Please just skip over that. And they understood that. They were like, okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to introduce him in Civil War. We're going to give you a little bit to let people know that like we understand the character, and then he is just Spider-Man when his movie starts. But the reveal in this movie that what this whole thing has actually been is we didn't get an origin movie. We got an origin trilogy.
Right.
These three Tom Holland movies are Spider-Man becoming Spider-Man. It's a little silly when you think about it that they basically took three movies to do what Sam Raimi's movie does in like less than an hour. But
Interesting the way that they recontextualize it, though.
totally, yeah. It's like they really spent time fleshing out this part of his life that we've really not seen in cinema before. Um, and yeah, it gives him the origin he deserves in a roundabout way that did not simply redo what had been done before. Especially when the Amazing Spider-Man movies tried that and failed at it. You
Oh my
had to
god, because
come at
the
it
gap
from a
between
different
Amazing
approach.
Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 1, it's only 10 years, not even, right?
Yeah,
So, Spider-Man 1 is still fresh in a lot of people's minds at that point. And you're retreading ground in a way where it's like, like like I'll copy your homework, but I'll change it just slightly so that like it's not so obvious that I copied, even though like it's essentially the exact same fucking thing, just with a very different portrayal of the character and like different circumstances. But when they introduced Tom Holland in Civil War, you're kind of led to believe that all the shit with Uncle Ben happened already. Like him getting bit by a spider and having the whole "with great power comes great responsibility" speech from him. That already came, and that was already off screen. So like we don't have to like retread that ground again. In this movie, they have Aunt May drop the "with great power comes great responsibility," and then it's like, oh shit, like
Yeah,
he hasn't internalized that yet.
totally. And that is I think that was my favorite thing about this movie is, um, having that come around in such a different and interesting way, but also have it being delivered by a character who is equal to Ben in being able to give that line.
Yeah,
Just totally fucking perfect. And I was also very happy because like that was the one thing about this movie I didn't have spoiled for me. I had no idea that was going to happen. Even like, and that scene is just so good because like when it's happening, you're like, oh shit, the goblin is going to fucking kill her. This is it, and then
right.
they swerve, and you believe it because oh shit, like yeah, you got me right, and then no, it pulls out the rug from you again. He like she gives the line, and it's like oh no, they are actually doing it, and then they do it, and it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
perfect.
right.
Um, and it is so like I have been waiting for that moment for such a long time. Not specifically the great power comes great responsibility line, because like you said, I figured that had already been done, just not been said aloud, right?
Right.
Um, but the important part for me when it came to his character, um, his movies, this entire trilogy, and him appearing in the Avengers movies, um, I have always taken these movies as doing their own thing, and that thing was just these movies are about Spider-Man being in the MCU and how he relates to this universe and the other characters in it. And I've always
Right.
thought that was a perfectly fine way to take the character because it's different than anything it done before.
Right.
But these movies have always just been they've been good. I've enjoyed them, but they've always just been kind of surface level in their approach to exploring Peter's character. And it's always been missing the one thing that Raimi just got perfectly, and you brought it up before. It's like when good things happen to Peter, bad things happen to balance that out. That is the life of him being Spider-Man,
Yep.
and he has not really had that in the MCU. The only thing he's really lost was Tony Stark, and that was not through his actions. That was Tony self-sacrificing. He has
Right.
never really had a major loss. Even in this movie, when his origin, his identity gets revealed, um, like which maybe that's my like most disappointing part of the movie is that's not explored more. But like that is more like an inconvenience. It treats it more like he is being outed as like a celebrity instead of being outed as a superhero.
Right.
Because
It's peculiar, but I guess it's because superheroes are so accepted in this world. Like now 5 years post fucking Infinity War, right? Like, um, so I guess the way that they view like heroes like Iron Man and Captain America and whatnot is so different compared to the way that like such a revelation would be like in the Raimi movies, where it's
totally,
like you know, it, and I can kind of see that the groundwork being laid there from like Homecoming, even right. Like you have like Captain America, and he's kind of like like the guy who gives the fucking speeches at detention or whatever on the recordings and whatnot. And it's like this is just kind of a normalized part of their society now.
yeah,
So him being, I thought it would be more interesting to like get into like the kind of like schism between people who are fans of Spider-Man the superhero and people who are on Mysterio's side because Mysterio was so well liked in Far From Home, and now it's like oh shit, like like he's a murderer, and like
yeah. And
he called this
I
drone
mean,
strike or whatever. Like
everyone kind of thought that's the angle they would take, especially after the last movie when it was such a big deal when they actually did do that reveal because Peter's like the only one they've let retain his secret identity, and it's
yeah,
always a good choice because that is core to his character. But the reason why his identity is important is because revealing it makes him a target. It doesn't necessarily make him a celebrity. But
Yeah,
you couldn't really do that in these movies because he doesn't have a rogues gallery of characters he's fought, right?
yeah.
Like the only major
I
one
was
he's
always
fought that's still alive is Vulture, who already knew his identity.
yeah. I
So
was always really apprehensive about like the choice to reveal his identity at the end of Far From Home because I thought, now we have no fucking heroes with secret identities in the MCU at all. Like they are all ingrained in this kind of like, oh, like Tony Stark is Iron Man, like Steve Rogers is Captain America, like
yeah,
this, that, the other, and Spider-Man's secret identity, like you said, like it's very integral to the nature of his character, especially considering the fact that he's a kid. So the decision to reveal it, I was always kind of lukewarm on it, but now with revelations in this movie, that like now for the next ones, like like it's back to being a secret identity again. Like like good on them. Like I appreciate that they realize how important it is that he maintains that secret identity because it has such an effect on his interpersonal relationships, which now he has to entirely fucking reforge. Like not just as Spider-Man, but also as Peter Parker. Like that's gonna be interesting. I think.
totally. Yeah,
Leading into
and I guess to bring my original point back around, um, the decision to kill Aunt May, which is this is like the second piece of Spider-Man media in the last 3 years to kill Aunt May, which is funny
right,
because the comics will not never let her go,
right.
even resulting in like one of the most hated storylines in Spider-Man
Yeah,
history,
one
which
more
ended up
day
being
is
an
fucking
influence to
atrocious.
this movie in a weird way.
Yeah,
Um, but like the fact that they let that happen and he finally experienced not only a loss but this major loss that had the ultimate ramifications of like when you get to the end of the movie, like you said, having his identity become a secret at the cost of literally the entire world not knowing he exists. Like that is the ultimate punishment. It is the ultimate like overcorrection for
yep,
everything good that's happened to him in this universe, and
yeah,
that is such the perfect place to put this character not only in this movie but going forward. And
right. And now
no, go
and
on.
now setting him up to get in the black suit, right?
To-
Like,
totally, yeah. But like that is the thing that interests me most about Spider-Man, and it's what ultimately made this a great movie for me. Like if that had not been in there, I would have still enjoyed it because everything else that's in it. But being able to finally come around and make this character um not only like figuratively Spider-Man but like literally at the end of the movie where they put him in the classic red and blue, it's like
yeah,
that ultimately tells you they totally understand what they're doing here and they totally understand the character, and that's really all I ask of people who make a Spider-Man movie.
yeah. I mean, it's so great to like have this character in the hands of someone who like understands him again because like it's so obvious that Mark Webb did not.
Yeah.
Um, he just had no real clue, like not just like of Peter Parker's ethos as like a character, but also just like the general direction of the way the story was going to go. Like I remember seeing something like Amazing Spider-Man 3 was going to be a story about like bringing back everyone who died, and so like they were gonna have like the Sinister Six kind of come in, and like the leader of the Sinister Six was gonna be like, oh, they had like Norman Osborn who dies in the second one, like they had his head on ice, and so, like they used some kind of super serum to like bring back like the fucking decapitated Norman Osborn as the
Ugh.
Green Goblin. Like, come on, man. Like, what are
Yeah,
you
and
doing?
it is, and like another thing I really like this movie is like, yeah, this movie also brings back villains, but does so in an interesting way that I think really highlights also what I like about Tom Holland's character is like his the naivety and the positivity he has from just being so young that he thinks
Yeah.
he can just fix things so easily,
Well,
which
it's great because
also ties into just how much it blows up in his face and
yeah,
overcorrects.
yeah, yeah. Because Aunt May wouldn't be dead if he didn't bring the Green Goblin into the fucking penthouse, right?
Totally,
Like,
yeah, and
that's entirely on him.
that is the great power, great responsibility through line here, and it works. I think it works totally right, and just gives him such an interesting perspective to his character that we haven't really seen with the other characters. Like Toby's character is all also very positive, but like his movies, his villains did die. You know, not necessarily on his hands, but like they weren't really about saving them, right?
Right.
So it was kind of a nice, interesting twist to put that on it.
I
Even
mean,
if even if it does require a bit of suspension of disbelief, like it is the most aspect of this movie that you really can't think about, like what happens now that these characters are fixed and go back to their universe.
yeah,
Like
right,
it's
right. I mean, I
clear,
guess just sets up like an alternate timeline, right?
yeah,
Like,
it's clear like they had no interest in explaining that, and it's fine that they don't, but
yeah, I
like
don't think it really needs to.
it doesn't, but it is very much the one thing that's like, please don't think about this. Um, Another thing I wanted to touch on about the ending, and it was such a nice and perfect parallel to the ending of Sam Raimi's first movie, is when he walks into like the coffee shop
Right.
and talks to MJ after she doesn't know who he is. There's such a nice subtle moment that was so subtle I actually almost didn't catch it, where he sees the scar on her head from the battle,
Yeah.
and that
No,
is what basically convinces him not to do anything. And that is the moment, like, he accepts that I am Spider-Man. I can't always have what I want, and I have to accept the responsibility that my power comes with me, just like the end of the first movie.
yeah.
It is so good. I live for those moments where they just totally get the character.
Yeah, I really like. I adore that scene for Spider-Man where they're at Norman's funeral and Mary Jane is like, like, oh, it's you, Peter Parker, like, like you're the one, and like Peter has to kind of like swallow, like, it would be so easy for him to kind of just fall into this temptation and be like, this is everything I ever wanted, like this is what I've been longing for since the start of, like he fucking opens the movie like, like, oh, this is a story about a girl, right? Like
Yes.
this is everything that he ever wanted, but because he doesn't want to see her in danger, he has to kind of, you know, push her away. And so now at this point, you know, he doesn't have anything anymore. Like Norman is dead. Harry ate Spider-Man's guts, like, it's like, I swear my father's grave, like Spider-Man will pay.
Yeah.
And fucking Mary Jane is, he now has to kind of distance himself from her a bit more, even though she clearly like wants a romantic relationship with him. Like it's rough. It's rough on all fronts from him, but like this is that's the hand that he's been dealt, and it's the best way that he has to go forward and maintain his dual identity. And
Yeah.
so you have that kind of coming forward now with Tom Holland, and it's just so interesting to see. 'Cause the future for him is like wide open at this point, right?
Totally,
Like,
and like there, I know a lot of people have complained about like just how much his character has relied on like other characters in the universe, like Tony Stark and such like that. But I'm so free. As much as I enjoy that, I'm happy that he's free of those shackles. I'm happy that he is free of basically all the side characters that are in this movie, which I'm sure some of them will be brought back at some point. But now they're not beholden to that. They can basically do anything they want with this character,
yeah,
while also having him be at the point where he is Spider-Man now, and also having him be at basically his peak. He understands how to be the character, both
right.
mentally and physically, and is at the top of his game. He's not like learning the ropes anymore. Um,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
you don't have to go through this whole like like, oh, I'm having doubts about my powers or whatever. Like like he is pretty much going to be you know at where his development should be. We don't have to really like be at a scene setting stage anymore, and he can kind of fight some more interesting members of his rogue gallery that really weren't explored. Like Black Cat is probably overdue at this point.
totally, yeah.
Um,
I completely forgot that Felicia Hardy was in those fucking Amazing Spider-Man movies.
yeah, yeah.
And I do hope if they do the black suit again that they find it like a different, interesting way to do it.
Oh my god. Oh, I mean, I was really when I heard that Venom 2 ended with him coming into the MCU, I was like, oh my god, we're doing this.
I haven't seen the second one. I fucking hate that first Venom movie.
Well, it's fucking frustrating because you can't have a Venom movie, and like I've complained about this at length, but like a Venom movie without Spider-Man as his through line, like it just doesn't fucking work.
Yeah, and
Like,
they completely struggle to give his character a purpose in that movie, and they fail at it. There's
well,
nothing there.
this whole this whole idea with Eddie Brock, like kind of the fucking, the bumbling reporter who's like jealous of Spider-Man, like, and then you have this codependent fucking symbiote, and then these two kind of come together and they like feed into each other. Like, that is such a good story beat, and Spider-Man is so integral to it that when you remove that component and you just have it be like, oh, here's a fucking reporter and he finds this fucking symbiote and it just makes his life miserable and they're kind of like the odd couple. Like, that's not Venom.
Yeah.
I don't know what the fuck it is, but it's not Venom. And so to wrap it around and bring him into the MCU, it's like, wait a second, like, what are we doing here? Like, this is it was a peculiar choice.
Like
And I
even
think
the
they knew
explanation
that.
for how it happens is so tenuous.
I think they knew that was weird because the second they bring him into the MCU, they take him right out of
Yeah.
it. So
Like Kevin Feige's like, I'm not having this shit.
yeah,
We're
right.
doing things on my own term here.
No, because it's not Venom. Like, it's not Venom the way that Venom in a Spider-Man movie should be presented. It's not. Because the most important point of Venom is having that black suit arc come to its conclusion, like, like having it ride out, and like Spider-Man coming to terms with like who I am when I wear this thing. Like, that's not me, right?
Yeah.
And he rejects it, and then the fucking symbiote being hurt goes with Eddie Brock. So you need to lay down a lot of groundwork to really make it work in the context of Spider-Man. So just inserting, fucking Tom Hardy, bumbling around in a bar, like he's from an alternate universe, like where he had no relation to Spider-Man at all. Like, that's not going to work at all. And I trust that they're smart enough to realize that because they just took him right out, but he leaves a piece of the fucking symbiote behind for you. So I guess that's going to be
Which is also
even though
smart
they
because
really didn't have to do that. They really
they
didn't.
didn't, but like now also we don't have to go through the fucking explanation of where the symbiote comes from again. It's like
Well, I thought they were
it's
going to do
simple.
Secret.
What's that?
I thought they were. I thought that like one of the Disney Plus things was going to be like Secret Wars.
Not yet. They have a show called Secret Invasion, which is about the
Oh,
Skrulls
okay.
and Nick Fury and stuff. But
Okay, gotcha.
I suspect at some point, like one of their big crossover movies will be Secret Wars. Like
Yeah, because Secret Wars would have been the place to introduce it.
yeah, and it gives you a perfect explanation to bring back characters in the MCU who have died and maybe you want to see again, but like don't
Right.
undo their death, right? It's too perfect not to do.
Yeah.
But like I've also seen people suggest like they should do like an Amazing Spider-Man 3 where they have Andrew Garfield fight Tom Hardy, and I was like, please
No.
do that instead of having him in the MCU. I'm fine
I
with
mean,
that.
yeah. I mean, if you're gonna do it, then that would be preferable. But
Especially
like,
because they have the line in this movie about how he gets jealous that he hasn't fought an alien. It's like,
I
are they
know, I
actually setting this up?
know. I mean, silly. It would be very silly, but like, clearly they're like not above like having these two things be interconnected because now we have Morbius coming out and like Vulture is in it. So like,
Yeah, God, who knows how that's gonna work?
yeah, I don't know. I have no fucking clue.
Um, I do. Okay, since we're on the subject of villains, let's talk about how they handled the villains in this movie. How did you feel about each one they
So,
brought back?
Willem Dafoe, I thought he stole the show.
I mean, he always does. It's like he never left the role.
I know. It's so interesting to me because I saw a lot of people complaining about like this Jekyll and Hyde sort of situation that he has with like Norman and the Goblin, but like
Dude,
that's
what?
always been how Raimi's been presented the
That's his
character.
character.
Right? I know, it's so weird. It's so weird. But like the criticism I think was like, oh, like Norman as the Goblin, like like it's not actually a split personality. It's just like him giving in to like this urge that he has, like like go against everyone who's wronged him or whatever. But like I think that's still coming through here.
Yes.
Um, I appreciate that Willem Dafoe was clearly looking to fucking like have this character mean something. Like he wasn't looking just to be here and like like make a cameo, like like say some fucking cutesy lines like I'm something of a scientist myself. Like they had to like throw that bone in there. But like that's not the point of introducing this character. The point of introducing this character was that he introduces this kind of like moral dilemma to Peter Parker, right? Where
Yeah, and
it's like,
he
oh,
is also Spider-Man's actual arch nemesis. Like,
yeah, yeah,
makes perfect sense to have him be in this movie in this role. Um, I was really happy with how they handled Doc Ock. Like they pulled him out before he goes through his kind of turn back to good, but
yeah.
they don't
I mean,
completely abandon that. They still have him do a version of that in this movie, and it works.
I thought the timing on that was a little peculiar because it's like you remember it's like about to fall in the river, right?
Yes.
But like he had already turned back to good at that point in Spider-Man 2, no?
Listen, the script
Looking
writers
about
knew the exact like half frame that they could pull him out of where he would still be evil.
you know what?
Like I said, like this film isn't perfect. There are places where it is a little sloppy, and how they bring back the villains is a little bit a part of that. But like those are things that are easy to forgive just because everything else kind of works.
Yeah, the idea of bringing back these characters is like it's cute enough that like it winds up working even though like all of the specifics of it aren't necessarily good.
Yeah, like you can
Like
nitpick it. Like why didn't they bring back fucking Topher Grace's Venom instead? Like that would have actually made more
well, he didn't
sense.
die. He didn't die.
Topher Grace?
Yeah, did he died?
Yeah.
When did he die? It's been a while since I've seen
Uh,
Spider-Man 3.
uh, Peter threw the pumpkin bomb to blow up the symbiote, and Topher Grace jumped in front
Right,
of it.
right.
But I mean, even then, it's like Lizard didn't die and Sandman didn't die, so
Well,
they were
Sandman
kind of
kind of
stretching it in this movie too.
yeah,
But
right.
I do like I can't remember. I don't think it was explicitly said, but my interpretation of it was that the Sandman is dying, and that's why he is stuck in the Sandman form throughout the movie. Like
You don't think that's just because they couldn't get Thomas Hayden Church to come back to the set?
I'm sure. Okay, I'm sure that was part of it, but like you could write it in universe explanation where it's
Because
like,
the footage that they use for him when he like turns back to normal, like that's footage from Spider-Man 3 that
yeah,
they
same
reused.
with the lizard from Amazing Spider-Man.
Right. So like
But like you can easily justify that by saying like maybe his body is breaking down and he can't go back anymore, and
yeah, sure. You
that's
can
why
make
curing him also makes sense.
right.
Um, but yeah, like I
You
said,
gotta go
like
back to the
they stretch their own rules a bit to make this work, but it is ultimately fine.
Yeah. So in terms of like Alfred Molina's performance, like I thought like he did a fine job. Um, he also had this sort of like like the dichotomy between him being like snarling fucking Doc Ock before he gets cured, and then like kind Otto like after he gets cured, like it's really super distinct. And I get the feeling that like he kind of had to like ham up both to like make that like work as well as like he wanted it
A little
to.
bit, yeah.
Um, because in Spider-Man 2, like the line is a bit more blurry than I think it was in this movie. It's definitely a bit more clear that and the PS4 game I think really nailed it as well. It's like
I think that is probably the best implementation of the character in general.
right. It's like how much of this is the influence from the fucking like the damaged chip, and how much of this is just Otto. You know what I mean? Like the line gets a little blurry, and it's really interesting to see it in the fucking in Spider-Man 2, but it's also like explored a bit better in the PS4 game where you kind of see hints of it even before he fucking goes through the malfunction with the fucking neurotransmitter or whatever. I think that the decision to make the arm CGI instead of practical effects has ups and downs. Like, I think in Spider-Man 2, they really did a great job with the puppetry of it.
Totally.
And it was really a big chance for Sam Raimi to kind of flex, like, his horror chops, like, especially in the scene where, like, he's on the operating table, and they fucking, like, come out and they fucking attack the fucking doctors and shit. Like, that scene is iconic. I think it only really works because the arms are practical effects, and I can see why they would want to do it CGI, especially with all like the nanotechnology shit that they did in this movie. But I feel like it's not weighty enough in terms of like what I would want to see these arms doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
it does feel like they cut a corner, and maybe they just straight up had to. Maybe they just didn't have time to do that.
Well, no, I feel like no one really does practical effects like that anymore.
That is another problem with the modern film industry, but but I think also a part of that is like you're cutting so many corners to get these movies out quick that
Yeah.
they
Well,
kind of have to leave a lot of it to
they had time
post.
with this one though because the pandemic delayed it, right?
Did it? I mean, it still came out a little out of over 2 years from the last movie. Like it was a really quick turnaround.
Yeah, right.
So it's hard to say. You are ultimately right, and like that's part of one of the reasons why Spider-Man 2 is still so iconic
Yeah, it's a great.
and
It
still
still holds
lasts to
up.
this day. Um, but I also I really appreciate that they gave him that little moment with Peter at the end, just like
Yeah, it was
allowing
good. It was
Peter to
great.
see the results of his actions. Just have him be like Otto is still in there, right? He's
Right.
not the monster. It's one of those things that just kind of makes this such a good epilogue to the other movies.
But it kind of it's interesting because like it feels good when it's Otto, but it like it rings really hollow at the end with the Green Goblin, right? Like you have Norman on his knees and he's like, "What have I done?" But it's like you don't really get anything out of that. Like there's no real catharsis to be found there because the
Yeah,
damage is
you're
so
right.
done at that point.
You're right, and
Um,
it is one of the problems of having such a stuffed movie, where it's like you don't have time for everything.
yeah,
But yeah, but I did appreciate just the lengths that Toby went to save him. Like him having that second chance to save Norman, even after, or sorry, even leading up to still being backstabbed by Norman again, he was still willing to put himself
right.
in harm's way for Norman, and it's just
Now,
so
did
good.
you geek out over like the musical cues that they reused from
Oh my
like
god, yes. I
yeah,
don't
like
know how many. I don't
I
think they
was not
reused a
assuming
lot
it
from
was that
Amazing
far.
Spider-Man, but like every time they use the sting from the Elfman score, it is just like so fucking perfect. It's just like the
They even used the fucking the Hans Zimmer like when Electro first shows up, like
yeah.
they even use like that track from Amazing Spider-Man 2. It's like holy shit, like they really did that. Like
Yeah, it was nice to see, and like it's funny. I recently re-listened to like the main theme from the
right.
Amazing Spider-Man, and it's fine, but it also doesn't feel like a Spider-Man theme. It is
Yeah,
not.
I can see that.
It
I can
is
see
not
that.
like as nearly as iconic or as sweeping or as grandiose as Elfman's theme, which is like one of
Yeah.
the best superhero themes ever written.
Well, I kind of associate that with superhero movies at this point. Like
Yeah,
it's
and I'm
you know,
glad I had no doubts that they were going to do that, but I was still so happy that they did. Like
yeah, I mean
you
it's
have to have
great that
it.
they were able to like go that extra mile and do that because I wasn't expecting them to do that.
Yeah.
So
And I'm also like you brought up Electro. I'm glad we got a good version of Electro.
oh my god. I mean, you know what? Like they took a lot of liberties with him because like they kind of had to make
Yes.
him not ridiculous.
I mean, I wasn't
I
even expecting them to explain how he stopped being blue. Like I thought they would just drop him in with the new look without any explanation.
right.
But I'm glad they even went to that length.
Yeah. I feel like people would have probably nitpicked if they didn't. So like
For sure.
good on them for doing it. Like I honestly don't think that like that going that far was necessary. Um they did a fairly good job with him. Um they gave him a little more fucking pathos than he ever had in Amazing Spider-Man 2, where he was just this kind of electrician. Um, it was weird because it's like you know everyone that came into the fucking into this universe or whatever is like people that knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man,
Yeah.
right? And then Electro is there, and then Electro like clearly doesn't know because he's like, oh man, like I always imagined you to be black. So it's like
My I did think about this, and my sort of headcanon for that was the spell that brought them through made them aware of Peter Parker's identity.
sure,
Like that's how I
okay,
kind of rationalize it, because that's really the only way it can work.
yeah, right,
But
right. I mean,
like everything about that, it's ultimately just magic, and it is such a hard thing to write because with magic you can literally do anything.
yeah, of
So
course, of course.
it kind of hand waves away a lot of things. It is a little sloppy, but like I
Yeah,
said,
you don't have to get into the nitty gritty of the writing in terms of that because like you know you can kind of just justify anything by saying, "Oh, it's magic. I don't have to
Yeah,
explain it."
they've introduced that in the MCU. You kind of have to live with it, good or bad, and for ultimately, it does serve a good purpose in this movie.
But I'm excited to see the direction that Raimi goes with it because Raimi is doing Multiverse of Madness. So like
Yeah,
I'm interested to see that. Even though like I'm pretty lukewarm on Doctor Strange as a character, I think letting him kind of go all out, like giving him like big budget to do a Marvel movie, giving him characters that can really do anything like fucking Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange. Like I'm curious to see where he's gonna go with this one.
I mean, I've
Um,
already heard wild things about people like rumoring that they're gonna bring Fox's X-Men character into it because it's another
oh my
multiverse
god,
movie, and it's like, how far are they going to go with this concept? Like, that's also interesting to see.
that would be ridiculous if they really did that. I'm not sure if I'd buy it, but like
No, but it,
that's crazy.
so it's kind of interesting. So they had the trailer for that at the end of this movie, and
Right.
they released it online, I think today. And when you watch it at the beginning of the trailer, they have the Marvel logo, but the way they did the logo in the trailer was have the original Marvel Studios logo, the one that played before Spider-Man and the Fox movie and all the old ones, kind of
Yeah, yeah.
transition into the new Marvel Studios logo.
Interesting.
So they kept that aspect of it in this trailer, and it's like, okay, like maybe they really are doing something like that.
That would be really interesting.
And
But what X-Men character would tie into this multiverse of madness? Like, I mean, because I know Scarlet Witch is like
the
originally
one
like
I
an
heard
X-Men.
they would bring back was Patrick Stewart, or not Patrick Stewart.
Okay.
What is the
Ian
other?
McKellen.
What, what's that?
Ian McKellen.
No, no, sorry, Charlie McAvoy,
Oh,
the
okay, okay,
other
okay.
the other Professor X. I guess if you're gonna bring an X Men character, it's either Wolverine or Professor X. So.
Right. Well, but isn't she Magneto's kid? No.
Not in the MCU. So that would be kind of an interesting dynamic.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's still the entire question of how they're even going to bring the X Men over
Yeah.
eventually.
Right.
So
Right. Now, bear in mind, I haven't seen fucking WandaVision or like any of the Disney Plus shows. Like the last Marvel movie that I watched before this one was Endgame. No, it was Far From Home.
hmm.
So like I have been so lost on whatever the fuck is going on in Phase 4 or whatever. 'Cause I didn't see Shang-Chi. Like I didn't see fucking the Eternals.
It doesn't seem like they're tying it in as heavy as I thought they would. Because I remember when I watched WandaVision, it was like people were talking about, oh, this is going to be the lead in to Spider-Man and Loki and Doctor Strange and the multiverse. And it
Right.
really isn't. Like there's like a minor scene at the end because like from what I understand, Doctor Strange is supposed to be in that show more heavily, and they cut that. So
Okay.
I think they are kind of backtracking, going, you don't necessarily need to watch everything to understand what's going on. They're not making the multiverse as intertwined with all these shows as you would think. They all just kind
Right.
of touch on the subject.
Well, this one is probably going to be like the big one coming
Yeah,
up, where
eh,
it's like
yeah.
we have like alternate Doctor Strange or whatever, and then you have people who are like, "Oh my god, like I watched What If, so I know what this
I
is."
did watch
Like,
What If, so I do know what that is.
okay, okay,
But I don't even know if that's what they're going for.
okay.
Like that might be a reach because I don't think as many people have watched What If as even the other Disney Plus shows.
Because it's a cartoon, so it
Exactly.
kind of puts
Yeah.
a lot of people.
Um, and you mentioned Sam Raimi. I wanted to talk about this. What do you think about the possibility of doing a Spider-Man 4 at this point?
Um, I don't know where they would go with it. Um, I think what we got in terms of like an epilogue to Tobey Maguire's character, like I thought that was fine. I know that there are people who are saying like, "Oh shit!" Like it's already confirmed now that like now we have Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man 4.
I saw a rumor today. I don't think it's true, but like I saw a rumor today they might do an animated movie. Like,
But don't Tobey Maguire and Kristen Dunst like don't they have like bad blood between each other?
I don't know. I mean, they dated during the movie, which seems to be
Right.
a recurring thing between
Yeah,
Spider-Man
really, right?
and,
Like,
and the female lead. I don't know specifically. I know she specifically. They asked her if she was going to be in this movie and she said no, but she
Right.
would certainly be open to becoming MJ again in the future. So she
Gotcha.
hasn't closed that door on it.
Okay. Interesting. All
But
right.
yeah, it's like there's certainly more will for that and fan interest in that than there has ever been.
Yeah, I mean, well, now I think you can see that with all of them though, because you have people now. I'm seeing there's a lot of clamoring for Amazing Spider-Man 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like give him a trilogy, and it's like, wait a second,
Well,
like,
if you want to do that, maybe find a different director and a
oh
different
yeah, I was gonna say
screenwriter.
like maybe if you didn't have Mark Webb, then it would be something else. But um, because the first two were Mark Webb, I can't imagine that they wouldn't want to get him back for a third one. Um, they were going to go that route. I really hope they don't.
Yeah. Um. Yeah, it's really interesting to see what the future Spider-Man is going to be. I mean, I know even Tom Holland has said he's not even sure if he wants to come back. Like,
Right. Well, I mean, I'm sure he's gonna come back at least for like because first of all, there's a contract for 3 more. He's got to come back for at least one of them. Because there's no way that they're gonna be able to transition it into a Spider-Man that isn't him.
yeah,
Um,
and money certainly talks, and I'm sure they would
yeah,
give him a
for
lot of
sure, for
money.
sure. He he's gone on record saying like, oh, like like I think it's time to do like Miles Morales or Spider Gwen or whatever the case may be. But like,
Which I'm sure they
I
will do,
I
but
think
probably not in the MCU.
yeah, for sure. I mean, like we have Spider Verse for those movies though, and Spider Verse is like very much its own thing. Like I'm really excited for the fucking the next one to come out. I really hope that they don't um they take what they learned from the first one and that they actually like don't sell out with the second one because the first one was a real fucking labor of love on their part. Like it took a lot of budget and a lot of time, and so I just don't want them to like rush it, and I
Well,
don't
it's
want them
interesting. They're
to.
already setting up like they announced it as part one, so you got to think
Yeah,
there's at
yeah,
least
yeah.
another part after.
I was floored. I was floored when they did that because it's just fucking bizarre. I hope that they do right by it because I really enjoyed the movie just from an animation perspective. I thought it was gorgeous.
I
Um,
I am really happy that just Spider-Man is so popular and being handled well again. Because like,
yeah.
man, it sure seemed like after the Amazing Spider-Man 2, um, things were gonna be rough. Because even when Homecoming came out, it did well, but it didn't do as well as the original movies did. So it seemed like is Spider-Man ever going to be at the top again like he once was? And
Well,
then this movie comes out and makes more than everything except for Endgame in its opening
yeah.
weekend. And it's like
And this
he,
this one had a
he's
crazy
really
opening.
he really is back.
Yeah, yeah, I'm really glad for it because Spider-Man is my favorite Marvel hero, and
Yes,
like,
me too.
but like, it's not even just in the MCU because now you have like great Spider-Man portrayals like across like all different forms of media.
I'm
Like
so
the
excited for
Sony
the sequel
game,
to the PS4 game. Like,
yeah, the Sony games look really good. I mean, like I'm really glad that they're going in like a unique direction with the storytelling in them. I am I'm fairly excited for the next one, even though like open world games are like really not my thing.
I mean,
Like I
I could
want to
talk for
know.
so long about just how well they did fucking the Peter and Octavius relationship in that
Yeah,
game.
it's
Like, it was
great. It's
fucking amazing.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I was kind of lukewarm on the storytelling in the Miles Morales game.
Yeah,
Um,
it's not as strong, but
but in terms of the setup for the next game, I think it's really interesting, and I think like gameplay wise, it's an improvement in pretty much every way. So I'm excited to see how they merge like the storytelling of the PS4 game with the gameplay of the PS5 game to make like an interesting story about Venom and whatever other villains they want to introduce in there because Venom is my favorite Marvel villain. So like
yeah, they're doing
they're
Venom, they're doing Craven that we know of.
yeah,
So,
so cool, so cool. I
and we're
I,
also
I hope they get it right.
I don't know if you were aware of this, but they're also making a solo Craven movie.
Yeah, I heard about that. I heard about
I
that.
think isn't it Jared Leto starring as Craven?
Is he?
I think that's who they cast as Craven.
No, who did they get as Morbius?
Um, no, that was Jared Leto, right?
Yeah, that's what I
Who?
was gonna
Okay, so
say.
then
That's what
who
I was
did they
gonna say.
get as Craven? I
Question.
know they cast someone already. Hang on, I gotta look this up because like I
Okay,
remember there was a recent casting about this.
interesting. Because I had heard about a Craven the Hunter solo, but I didn't hear anything about casting. Oh,
I want to.
Aaron Taylor Johnson.
That's who it is. That's who it is. Okay, and that's
It's
also
Pietro.
he's not the greatest choice, but
That's peculiar.
yeah. Um, but I think I also heard that Craven was originally going to be in No Way Home before they went this route. Like
Right.
it was going to focus on that, and that makes sense too, right? Like it's Craven is long overdue for a fucking movie, but like I don't.
And I honestly thought it would be a really good interest, like opportunity to do like Chameleon or like like there's other characters that like we are not used to seeing portrayed like on film.
Fuck! Now that they brought Kingpin back, please we have Spider-Man fight Kingpin? Because Kingpin is like
Yes,
maybe my
that would be great.
favorite fucking villain. So
And
although
then tie in Daredevil in that too, because that's a great that would
yeah,
be a great opportunity to do that.
yeah, like I don't want to spoil fucking Hawkeye because it just aired, but I was not necessarily thrilled how they handled Kingpin in that.
Oh, he's in that.
Yeah, he is in that.
Okay.
But
Is it the same one from Daredevil?
yes and no. Like I mean, there's nothing in it that necessarily conflicts with what happens in Daredevil, but they're being kind of iffy about whether him and Charlie Cox as Daredevil are share the same canon as that. Let's say,
Okay.
like until there's something that conflicts with it, I would assume they're the same, but they're not saying one way or the other.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah, that's another one I haven't seen Hawkeye. But bringing him in because like he's just as much of a Spider-Man villain as he is a Daredevil villain. So
Yeah, I mean he is like I know he in the comics he's more associated with Daredevil, but because of the '90s animated series where he was like the main villain in that series, like
right.
I'll always associate him with Spider-Man more.
Well, and he's also a major part in the PS4 game as well. Like
Yeah,
there's a lot of Spider-Man media where Kingpin kind of because he's in the comics as well and the shit that fucking leads up to One More Day.
yes,
Because Peter reveals his identity and in Civil War, and then fucking Kingpin has a fucking hired gun to shoot Aunt May. And that's what directly leads into him fucking making this deal with Mephisto. So like,
and again it's so fucking strange that has just come full circle to influencing this movie.
yeah, it's weird. Well, because it's so derided. It's
Yes,
so derided. And for good reason too. It's shit. But like, very very interesting that like they actually managed to make it kind of work in this one. And it speaks more to the groundwork that the MCU has laid here, and understanding of how the dynamics of this character work in the context of like him having his own solo movie, and it does to any sort of inspiration that they could have gotten from this god awful writing decision that they made in the comics.
yeah.
I couldn't ask for a better portrayal in that regard, so I'm pretty happy with that.
It's still such a bummer that we're dealing with this kind of shared custody of the character with Sony and
Yeah.
Marvel, because like what Sony has been doing with their solo movies is not impressive.
Well, yeah, well, Venom is fucking hot garbage. The first one. I didn't see the second one, but I heard it's quite bad. And I just again, I can't look at this like again like it's like the Odd Couple, right? I can't look at this character and think of it as Venom because that's not that's not Venom. Like
Yeah.
that's not him. Like, so it's weird because he's been kind of embraced by people who just don't understand like what makes this character good and want to see like I don't even know. I can't get into the minds of the people that gave that movie like a positive audience.
It's really weird. It has a really devoted fan base, and I've gotten into
Yeah.
arguments with some of them on Twitter, and they're just like so defensive of that movie, and I
But
don't
like,
get
I
what they
would
see
just
in
like
it.
to know like what is the appeal behind Tom Hardy's portrayal of Venom?
I don't know, and like it just feels like a faux MCU movie because they're going for that same kind of humor, without understanding what works about it. And Venom is also not the best vehicle for that kind of comedy.
Right.
So it just falls flat on its face.
Yeah. I mean, the character of Venom, like as he's supposed to be portrayed, is not a comedic one. You know what I mean? Like he has some like unintentional comedic moments in like the animated series when he's honking the horn,
Yeah.
but like he's not supposed to be funny. He's supposed to be intimidating. He's supposed to be a threat. So like, and the way that the character design has kind of evolved to reflect him being like imposing and intimidating is really interesting as well. Because when he was first introduced, he was kind of just like a riff on Black Suit Spider-Man, but then they like really went the extra mile with him. They made him fucking slobbery. They gave him these giant fangs, like these huge claws. Like they really went the extra mile and make him like super imposing and just like this very very distorted version of what Spider-Man looks like when he's wearing the black suit. And again, to divorce that element away from it and make it just kind of like, oh, yeah, he just kind of looks like this. Like it's weird. It's weird, and like I don't like the tiptoeing around, like like this is the reason why this is the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work.
No.
So I would love to just like have a sit down. Like maybe next podcast we can invite a devoted fan of Venom and sit them down and just have a civilized discussion. Like
Venom
what
has had a rough transition into cinema.
well, Topher Grace also.
Oh,
Yeah,
by the way, I don't know if you're available tomorrow night, but we're gonna watch Spider-Man 3 tomorrow night. So,
all right, I'll watch that with you guys.
all
I'll
right,
watch that.
that's good. Yeah, it's tough because like it's weird because I like Venom too, but I also recognize the inherent failing of the character in that like he's just evil Spider-Man. Like that's where his origin is from. That's what makes him
Well,
interesting. His contrast with Spider-Man.
yeah, right. These two characters are parallels of one another, right? Like that,
Yeah,
and that's what makes it like. That's why Venom can't really carry his own solo shit because he only works in the context of him being associated with Spider-Man or begrudgingly teaming up with Spider-Man to deal with fucking all these other symbiotes that come out of the woodwork. Like think like Maximum Carnage. Like when these two characters are put side by side, and one of them is like kind of like a distorted funhouse mirror version of the other one, it brings out characterization in both of them that you wouldn't really be able to explore if they were separated. And that's why Venom having his own solo verse, especially one where Spider-Man has absolutely nothing to do with him, like it's a fundamental failure.
yep,
So I don't know. Looking forward to seeing what they do with Venom in the MCU because now they clearly laid that groundwork.
yeah.
Um,
There's an opportunity
I hope
there.
they cast someone more fitting than Topher Grace.
Yeah, I would love to see the more comic accurate version of Eddie Brock because no movie has really done that either.
No. Well, I mean, he's only really been in Spider-Man 3, right? Like, other than the fucking Venom movies.
Yeah.
So, like...
But even though those are both very different interpretations of the character, which is
Yeah, well, I mean, the Spider-Man 3 one is a little more true to, like, the roots of the character. I appreciated that they kind of added this, like, finding religion angle to it. Like, like he gets him in a church and, like, the way that it's framed, like, with Venom fucking, like, the symbiote, like, kind of, like, coming down from above.
so many people lately have been shitposting that scene where he asks God to kill Spider-Man or kill Peter Parker, and it's so fucking great.
I love that though. I really really love. I remember there was fucking at a convention or something like that. I think it was like Comic-Con or something like that before the movie dropped. They showed that trailer at the end, like that scene at the end of a trailer that was exclusive to Comic-Con. And like I lost my shit seeing that as a kid because I was like, this is like everything I ever wanted.
Yeah.
Like that transformation of like Eddie Brock like turning into Venom there and lunging. I was like, oh my god, like this is gonna be fucking sick. And I saw the actual movie and I was like, oh yeah.
I mean, we like the Spider-Man 3 conversation has been had endlessly, but like I still think if you had that scene as the fucking cliffhanger to Spider-Man 3
Yeah,
leading
I
into
would have
4,
loved that. I would have loved that too.
that's all you need to do to restructure that movie. I mean,
Yeah.
a few other things here and there, but still, like
I
they would have made so much better.
I completely agree with you. Yeah. The only other thing I would maybe change about Spider-Man 3 is like changing Gwen Stacy's involvement in it because she's kind of just there to make Mary Jane jealous. Like,
yeah, it
really
didn't even need to be her.
Yeah, so we'll see where they go with it. I'll definitely watch it with you guys tomorrow, and I think that's probably a good point to wrap. Unless you had anything else to say.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I just want to say, like, it was just a really good movie, man. It's
Yeah,
not
it was fun.
it's not super deep. There's not a lot. Like, we've gone into it a lot here because we're like super big Spider-Man fans, but it's not like a complicated movie. It's just a fun superhero movie that also really finally, at least in the MCU, gets to the heart of this character. And I've been waiting a while to see this again, and
Yeah.
like I said, they took a really roundabout way to get here, but I'm so glad we're here.
And it's just so cute that they took the time to really like get into the nitty gritty of like what made like the Raimi movies in particular work, and like right Mark Webb's wrongs in terms of Andrew Garfield, and like kind of like bring it all on home, make a satisfying point for this character to now be, as you said, like free of like whatever shackles he had on him leading up to this point, and now just free to do whatever the hell they want to do with him in this new trilogy that he's been contracted for.
Complete
So we'll
blank
see where they
slate.
go with it. But I'm very very excited to see like now that he's kind of like got the reins. We'll see what we can do.
Yep.
Fun stuff.
All right. So we'll wrap it up here. Thank you everyone for listening to two people talk about Spider-Man for like an hour and 15 minutes. But
Fun.
it's fun. I love like it's been a long time. The last time we did this was 2014. It's been maybe a little overdue, but like this is way more than the first two movies in this trilogy. This is by far the most interesting one to talk about. So I'm glad we got a chance to do it.
And I'm honestly really glad that we got to talk about a movie and not like just complain about it the whole, because we shitted relentlessly on Amazing Spider-Man 1, Amazing Spider-Man 2. So, having a good reason to come back and visit these movies and say like, wow, like they really did something right here. Like that's it warms the cockles of my heart,
Yes,
because
it was very
I took no pleasure
no
in
it,
seeing.
like it was very cathartic to talk about those movies, but um I didn't want them to be bad.
No, me
Like
neither. Me neither.
I was not happy that they were rebooting it and moving away from the Raimi stuff, but I still wanted those movies to succeed. Um, they had big shoes to fill, but they just didn't even come close to filling them, and kind of
Right.
just they decided to shit in those shoes instead, and you kind of have to deal with that. But yeah, it is much better to be able to sit down and talk about what we like about Spider-Man again.
Yeah, I'm glad. I have my feelings on the MCU as a whole. I've learned to look at them in a different way than I look at most other movies, and I view them as roller coasters. But like, I'm really glad that I got to sit down and like just relive what I like about this character that I grew up with and have so many warm feelings about. Like, it's great. It's great to relive that.
100%. Yeah, I agree. All right,
All right, till next time.
Linda here. Thanks for listening.